everybody, grab your Bible and a pencil and a journal and maybe even a cup of coffee and join in on our conversation. But first, I would like for you to write this down. Philippians 3, verses 10 through 14. That I may know him and the power of his resurrection and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. Not that I've already obtained this or am already perfect, but I press on to make it my own, because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus.
Hey everyone, welcome to Write This Down with Dot Bowen. My name is Cara. I am Dot's daughter. And every week we sit down together and we have a conversation about God's love, about the Bible, and sometimes just about what God is teaching us. And in this episode, we are joining in the May crazy. If you are listening to this in the middle of May and you have 10,000 things going on, we completely understand. And so we talk about that. We talk about transitions and how do we navigate transition, or maybe you are wanting to be in a transitional season. You're wanting something to change. So how do you balance that with maybe you're looking at the past year, or you're trying to look forward into the summer or this next half of the year and figuring out a lot of unknowns. So we talk about how do we navigate that and how do we enter into a transitional or crazy season well. So we would love for you to pull up a chair and join in our conversation.
Hey, Cara.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, okay.
I am very tired today.
Well, I can see this. I can hear it. I can see it. Yeah, I can hear it. I hear you.
You know, I feel like it's probably, I say this because depending on when someone's listening to this, they probably are too.
Yeah.
Because May
is tough.
And I don't even have kids. Like, I just have family things that we're like going to. Well, I'm just saying that, like, you know, like we're going to, like, you know, we have multiple graduations and
yes,
they're
birthdays,
all different places and birthday. Yeah. It's like, there's a lot of May.
Yeah.
And Mother's on top of that, Mother's Day. And then on top of that, you have like school activities, you know, like that's what I'm like, if I can't imagine. So I say that to say, my heart goes out to any mom out there who, if you're listening in the middle of May, Godspeed.
Bless you.
May you have an extra nap in June. But anyway, I'm not complaining at all, but it just is. Yeah. I mean,
it's hard.
May is a transitional month in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of changes. And, you know, as I was reading Philippians, Paul was writing to the, church in Philippi. And of course, he was in prison. And as I was reading and thinking about Paul and, him saying, I got to forget the past and you got to move forward. And as we were talking about transitions, I thought, I can really listen to Paul because Paul understood. I thought if there's, one person that understood about change, it would be Paul. And I think for me, as we were beginning to talk about transition and try to encourage anyone that's having to deal with a life that they thought was going to go in one direction, it's going in another, or they're empty nesters, or they're sending off, their children to college, or their graduations, or birthdays, or there are a lot of things going on.
Or even just like the simple change of schedule. Like maybe there's not a huge change in terms of sending a child off to college or college to out of college or whatever. But just the day-to-day of if you have kids that are in school Monday through Friday and then they're not.
Summertime.
Yeah. Or even, I don't have any of that because I don't have kids. But there is still, and maybe this is just like culturally ingrained in us, I don't know, but there's still something about summer where it feels like a shift. Like even with my community group, we're like, okay, well, maybe we'll do something different for the summer months. And we have no reason to, in the sense of like, some of us are married, some of them are married, but none of them have kids. And so we're not, none of us are really like on a school schedule, but there's still something about
It's a
we're
season.
kind of in we're kind of
It's
like
a different season.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe we'll do something different. So anyway, all to say is when we're talking about what we were going to talk about on these episodes, that was one thing where we were saying whether it's not a big change, there's still a transition.
So this is the thing. Life is going to move forward.
But it's like there's a transition for a few months and then you go back to another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a lot of people where it's just going to be different for a season. And then you go back to school or, like that.
Or there's a transition and it never goes back to the same.
Yeah.
And not to be a, Debbie Downer over here, but there are some things that are happening in people's lives right now that are big changes, and they're having to deal with what now. And I think as I was studying and thinking about, our conversation today, often we think and live at what was. We live in the past. We live at our longing to have things like they used to be. Like, we were, as you've been a part of this, we just had, high school graduations, and we had all of these pictures of, this little video of Charlie and when he was young. And I'm looking at all of us and thinking about, everybody being so young. And I just remember thinking, those days, just wish, kind of wish they were still those, the young kids. But
I feel like I do the opposite when it comes to transition.
Mm-hmm.
I look more, and I think this is probably more of my personality, where I look more forward, but that still causes like angst because there's an unknown. I don't really, you may know something, like you may know like, oh, I know my child is going to college, or I know it's summer and things are going to, like there's some things you may know, but you don't really know what it's going to look like. And so you try to think through every scenario of like, well, what is this going to be like? And you try to prepare as best you can, but you can't prepare.
You can't prepare for something you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you can only do so much. But so to me, transitions, yes, I'm not saying I don't ever look back. I'm saying I lean toward like, well, what is the what ifs? Like, what is this going to look like? Or how can I like prepare for this? Even if it's just like emotionally prepare, like how can I brace for impact in a way? But you can't. And I think there's two sides of the same coin, where it's either looking back or you're looking too forward to where you're trying to deal with something that you haven't lived yet. Like you're dealing with an unknown, or you're dealing with a potential change, and you don't really know what that change is going to look like.
I just love the fact that, like, Ecclesiastes, you read, and Solomon, a very wise man, said there's a season, there's a season to smile, there's a season to joy, there's a season of sorrow, there's different seasons, and they go to extremes. Paul goes to extremes when he says, I've learned how to be content. I learned how to get by with humble means, and I know how to live on, a lot of
much or
a lot of
little.
Much, yes. So anyway, we tend to sometimes go from one extreme to the next. But what if you're in that middle? What if you're in that, like, I don't have a whole lot, and I don't have little, I don't have a lot. I'm right here. I'm stuck right here where I am right now. I don't want to look back. I don't have the joy of looking forward. I don't have any hope to look forward, and being content, is what Paul was talking about in Philippians. But I feel like he addresses all of that. He addresses about, yes, look forward. You've got to forget the past. Don't let the past keep you from moving forward. Don't live in the past. Live in what's now. And as you were talking about, I tend to want to look maybe what's next, but then again, we don't know what's next. And I find, these transitions, these life transitions are hard. I think it's very difficult to know how to deal with change. And I thought I was someone that loved change. I've laughed and talked about this for so many months now. I love change my hair color. I love to change my makeup. I love to change my coloring. My clothes. I love to change, almost anything. I thought, until God was like allowing me to live in a season that I'm still in, and that is everything's changed. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, we can overdo anything. Like, I don't how do I deal with the unknown, even in the change and the transitions? And I think, a lot of moms, we just celebrated, Mother's Day. I think a lot of moms have a hard time letting go of their children and letting them be adults. I remember my mother, bless her. I mean, she was adorable, but she would hold on to things that I did when I was 10. And I'm like, Mom, I'm 30. Like I don't do, I mean, she didn't try to feed me, with a spoon or anything, but there were attitudes that I might have had, when I was 10. And she continued and thought I did have that. So I think, as we're talking today and having this conversation, like how do we deal with change and transitions? How do we do it in a way that we're still trusting God and we still are being able to deal with what's now? And I do believe when Paul was saying, to forget the past and to move forward, that he was understood. He understood how important the past can play, the role that the past often can play in us moving forward or even being able to enjoy today. A lot of times we're still holding on to the past. And I think, if we're going to, not pick on moms, but, a lot of times parents tend to have a hard time letting older kids become adults. And it's hard as a mom to let go of that. I've done that. I know how hard it is. I can remember, when Christy got married, how hard that was when she got married, and then when Scott got married, when their husband or their wives was doing things for them that they called me and asked me to do for them, having to learn how now to be a mother-in-law instead of just a mother. So there's a lot of transitions in life. But I think in all of this, and one of the reasons, Cara, I feel that what Paul is saying in this is that so that we will know Christ. I think that Philippians 3 and 4 is strongly emphasizing all of these things that are happening in our lives is to help us to trust God more, help us to know Him, help us to see that He's in the middle of all of these things. If there's life, there's growth and there's moving forward. There's no staying still. And I think that's hard.
Like I said, I don't feel like I'm really in a season of transition at all, but I'm longing to be.
Yeah.
I would like for things to change.
Right.
And I think it's the same principle and heart of whether you're in transition or longing for transition, you still have to trust the Lord in the daily. And I think one thing that He is teaching me that, to be honest, I kind of forgot about it until this moment. So I have not done a very good job at the lesson, clearly, because I forgot
that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I kind of forgot that He was wanting this for me. But it's the whole idea of manna. It's like, don't worry about tomorrow, or even don't even worry about what's happened, because what's happened is what happened. I'm not saying that there's, fruit that can come from, learning from the past or, glancing back to be like, what happened, whatever. But I just mean, I don't want to miss what God has for me today. And I know you have said that a lot of times of like, God, I don't want to miss you today. But I think it is a lot of like, God's not waiting for something in the future to do something, or I don't know. It's just like,
we can know Him today.
And not just even, I think like knowing Him today, but then also just like trusting Him with today, or I don't know, just trying to keep my mind in today. Because like I said, I can be very future minded, which is a great gift, but where it can trip me up is the enemy can use that against me in a way of losing hope, because I'm like, I don't see how anything can change, or I don't see, it's like, I don't see any transition coming.
There's no growth, or there's no evidence that anything's going to change, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if I'm like looking, because I'm looking ahead at something that is unknown, that I don't know what God's going to do tomorrow. And so I have to keep my head and my heart in today, and not just in today, but also like keeping my eyes on Jesus today, not just like, whatever time it is today. Like, there is elements of that, but I think it's looking for God in the today. And I think there's some element where it's like a watch pot never boils.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think like whether you're like trying to just get through a season, if you're just like, if I can just get through May, if I can just get through the summer, if I can just, well, then you're not really enjoying it. You're not really.
That's right.
like you're only going to have your kids for a certain amount of summers. You're only going to have, with them being
Change is
home,
gonna
like
happen.
under your, like, or you only have, whatever your scenario may be. And so I think there's elements of that too. Like, I have to think that a lot of times because like even when we're with a family, like being with a family can be hard for me, not because I don't enjoy being with a family, but because sometimes I can feel like a fifth wheel in my own family sometimes. And and it could be really easy for the enemy to get in my head in that, to be like, oh, I can't see how this is going to change, or I can't, whatever. But keeping my eyes in the moment helps
And
me.
enjoying the moment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like enjoying it, because there's maybe a day where, we may not all be able to be together or whatever.
Right.
So,
and I think that's for me. May has just been one crazy event after another. I'm very thankful for all the events, don't get me wrong. But the busyness and the preparation and the going, and, it can get very tiring. And, I've wanted and I've prayed very much for me to enjoy my kids in all stages, like wherever, whatever. And it's hard when they're getting up in the middle of the night and, or they're 2 years old, but, saying not trying to live, well, if I just get through the infant stage, if I can get through the toddler stage, if I can get through the middle school stage, being able to enjoy all stages. But then again, even if it's not motherhood, it's also like if I could just get through, this stage of whatever. And I think wherever we are, I think that's the secret of being content. And Paul talks about that. But I feel like, these transitions is hard if you're always longing to want things in the past, or if you're always longing, you want things to change and you're not.
Or if you're trying to control the future, if you're trying to be like,
right,
okay, well,
that's not going to work well.
I gotta manage my future so that it's, fill in the blank. I think that's, a huge thing.
I think it's hard.
Especially with summer, because, what am I going to do with my kids? Or especially
exactly.
I think a lot of like single parents like that.
It's hard.
That would be super hard because you're having, or if like both parents do work, but it's like that. And then if you have to get extra help, like that could be an added finance, but I think like I go back to the daily bread and the manna, because it's like he's going to give us for today. Like he's going to give us the manna that we need today. Like he will provide, and he'll provide it tomorrow, whatever it may look like. And there's a song, I just remember this, there's a song called Daily Bread that has been super helpful for me, because it's like helped me kind of shift my perspective of when I listen to it. It's like, give me my daily bread. I'm going to praise you before I even go into the promised land. I'm going to look for you before I look for your hand. I'm going, and I think it helps us keep our sanity.
Yeah.
And I think too, it helps us.
It helps us to enjoy life a little bit better.
Yeah. To enjoy.
Yeah. The life that God has got us right now. I love this. In verse 10, it says that I may know him, talking about Christ, and the power of his resurrection means there's power in life. Now, Jesus is alive, and he says, I want to know like what it's like to live life and with his power, and that I may share in his sufferings. And I think we tend to skip over that because we really love living life in the power of the resurrection, where there's new life, there's a new beginning. Yeah, miracles. And it says, but I want to share in his sufferings. And I'm like, how many times do we really pray that? Becoming like him in his death, and meaning the surrender and being able to say, this is why I came. I came, this is why Jesus came. He came to die so that we can share in suffering in life through the power of his resurrection, through his power. And I think when you think about change, there's definitely was a change in when Jesus came and when he died, and for the believers. And I think, as transitions and being able to face whether, something is not changing, the hope you're talking about, like, God, I'm stuck. I feel stuck.
You don't you don't like the change. There could be some change happening, and
I don't want that. That's not the change I was talking about, you know. And I think, going back, that what Paul, that's why I was saying at the very beginning of our conversation, is that I could really listen to Paul and know that Paul knows what he's talking about. Like, there's one thing for somebody to tell you to deal with change and to deal with transitions when they've never had to deal with a change or transition. And I think when you're in a situation that you're either longing for a change and nothing's changing, or you're constantly, seems like there's something always changing, and you're sitting with someone having a conversation like you and I, and saying, I know what it's like I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is to deal with adult children. I thought it was hard to deal with them when they were little, but, teenage years or, they're going off to college. They feel like they're so independent. Unfortunately, they're not paying for their college, so they're not quite as independent as they think they are. But, feeling like life is, moving at a pace and things are happening. I've had to deal just in this last week. I've dealt with and talked with and walked alongside of people that are having their first child. That's a big change in their marriage. I've had and talked with people. I've had the conversations with people that are really expanding their family, and it's still a different change. I've had conversations where they thought that their direction and their career was going to go in one direction, and it's not going that. And then, sadly, but I also last week had to talk with someone where they were saying goodbye, that they were facing their short life, that, that they're about to pass on and go see Jesus face to face, literally. And any of those that I just talked about has been a way of having to deal with life in a way that you put it in the capacity of God is in the middle of all of that. Whether there's a new life, there's a baby about to be born, or there's the end of your life. And in both situations, and even with a change, a situation where they thought they were going to go in a different career and that's not happening. In all of life, there's a letting go of what we think we might have had, a letting go of what our dreams, of how we thought life is going to be. And there's a letting go of trusting God for the unknown and what's next. But I think in midst of every one of those things is an opportunity to see God's power to empower us, to push us toward the goal and toward what God has for us. Life is a journey. Life's hard. Life's difficult. And if you're going to live life and until you take your last breath, you're going to have to deal with transitions and change. That's just part of life. And it's not always easy.
I think one of the bigger challenges is not allowing whatever transition you're in to be a distraction, like not focusing on the transition, not focusing on whatever's happening.
Right.
Because I think that is an easy tendency, because it's like whether you're trying to manage it, whether you're trying to avoid it, whether you're trying to, I don't know, whatever it may look like. But I mean, and even specifically thinking about people going into just the summer months being different, that scenario, there can be so much managing happening, because it's like, and so much focusing on that, which again, it's not like that's bad, because you may need to set up, whether it be camps or childcare or I don't know, like something there, like there's elements of that need to be done, but it's more so, I guess, like doing that with like a surrendered and like open eye of like, okay, God, but I still don't want to, like, not being so focused on that. Or if you're, like I said, like I'm more of longing for transition, but then if I focus on that too much, then I'll miss today. Like the joy, but just the joy of the season I'm in, like there are good things about being in the season I'm in. It's like both sides of that, where it's not allowing the transition to be a distraction. And instead of focusing on that and trying to like manage or control, or, because that can just become so overwhelming, and then you may miss, the moment.
True.
But allowing, I don't know, like just focusing on God. And of course, again, it's not like we say that and it's like you go about your every single day and it's like I just mean, it's just like being aware of him, like if you're in the midst of planning and maybe even, and I'm preaching to the choir where it's like, okay, God, what should I do with this?
I think that our past, when Paul talks about forgetting the past, I think our past has a huge impact on our present. I think our present has a huge impact and past in our future, and which season of life and which transition we are going to be able to embrace. And I think that the way that we deal with some of our past or not deal with it does have an impact of how we're going to be able to enjoy today. I also think longing for a future has a big impact on how we're going to enjoy today. I think both of those, like you've said, and we've talked about, both of those are days that either we've already lived it or we're not lived it. And life means today. Today, you hear this all the time. Today's a gift. Today is the gift that you have. Yeah. And this is the only day that you have to live. That we don't know. There's no certainty about tomorrow, but we do have today at this moment. We may not have all day, but we have this moment. And I think that's one of the things of what we're trying to say is that transition sometimes, I think it kind of kicks us back a little bit, or we're like in this change. It's something uncomfortable. We're not used to it, and we don't know how to manage it. I think it's probably a lot of problems with control. Like I don't know how to control it. And I think, it's not about what was or what is to come, but it's what's now. Like, what do I do now? Where, like, God, this is where we are now.
Remember that time I didn't think that I had control issues?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember some of those other things. Yes. Yeah. And, but it's so funny because who doesn't have control issues?
I know. I don't think I have control. I don't think that's something I deal with.
I know. And there are sometimes you'll say things, I'm like, really? Okay.
But what I'm saying is I'm not type A, where I'm, have to, but also don't load the dishwasher like that, So
yeah. Exactly. That's not the way I do things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I think as we're thinking about moving forward, I think I feel like this is what our conversation, what we're wanting to really accomplish is we have no control, like you said, about, what's ahead in transition. How do we deal with transition when it's not comfortable? It's not a transition we want. When it's something we're not used to or comfortable with, we tend as humans to want to feel like we're in control, or we feel like we can handle or manage whatever's happening. And transition often brings an uncertainty that we cannot control, like you said, or be able to manage, how life's going to be. And we have in our mind sometimes what we think how life should be. And, this past week, as I shared, I unfortunately am so sad, having to deal with someone that I love dearly, and watching her grab hold of me, hug me, kiss me, and say, thank you for pointing me to Jesus. I get to go see him soon. And when she said those words, it was like, it just really was like, wow. And I said to her, you're encouraging my faith, because in this season of life, in this new transition that we did not expect at this moment, we know that we're all appointed once to die, but at this point, when how God was right there. I mean, it was just like everything, Cara, that I had believed and told her about and shared with her about God's faithfulness at every moment of our life, whether we're living life to the fullness or we're looking at life at the end of our lives, God's faithfulness is there. And I looked at her and I thought, I see so much of Jesus that it strengthened my faith that I knew the moment that I will be in that situation, that God would be there too. And I think that these transitions, these moments of uncertainties and these transitions, when we find ourselves in a place that we're having to have the new, this is a new now. Like, this is something I've got to come up with a new way of doing things, or a new way of thinking, or a new way of dealing with whatever is, then God is going to be there and He'll lead us and direct us, whether it's straight into His arms or down to continue to walk with Him in the journey that He has provided or willed for us.
I do think I want to have two thoughts that I want to point out. And without going into the details, with your close friend who is unfortunately at the end of her days.
On earth.
Yes, on earth. It's when you get to that point, it just like is a good reminder of what really matters. And I think like when we get in these seasons of whether it's transition or just busyness, like how we've said at the beginning, like, everyone's tired, everyone's busy, everyone's got 10,000 things that they're doing right now. And yes, there are things that do have to get done. But at the end of the day, like what really matters? Like when you come to the end, are you going to be glad that you got that school party cupcake just perfectly? I don't know, just like became something, but or you
got the job that you wanted, or you got the
but and not saying that those things that you're dealing with aren't important. I just think there's just like that. Sometimes when we're in the crazy, it's important to remember like what really is important. And I think too, with her situation, and again, without going into details, you have had like the last year has been, and I know we've referenced it on here, has been the most chaotic year of your life. You had zero margin for hardly anything. I mean, you were at your wit's end every single day.
I felt very isolated because I couldn't do things. Yeah.
But you, in the midst of the busyness, you made time for her.
Then I don't get me crying.
Sorry. But I just think it's like, it's those things of like, sometimes we can get so caught up in the busy and what has to get done that we can miss people, and again, it doesn't mean like, yes, there are things that have to get done. So, I mean, you still moved into your house, there were things, but I think we always need the reminder of like, at the end of the day, like, I just keep thinking of like, aren't you so glad that you made time for those moments? And even I feel terrible because I have moments where I'm like, why are you going to go see her? You have 10,000 things to be doing. And that was terrible. And not saying that wasn't worth it. I mean, I would like say it more in a joking manner.
You just knew how busy and tired.
Yes, because I'm just like, you need a nap. But that relationship and that relationship in particular, and again, without going to like details, but she, like, there was more that God was doing there and you knew that. But it was like, it's just taking the moments of like not missing, the relationships and the people that God may, whatever they may look like. But I think like that's a great reminder in the midst of our busy seasons and how you can look back now and you can see like, aren't like so glad that you went those days that were so inconvenient. You had zero time and you knew that you were going to be there for hours. It wasn't like, it was not convenient at all. But on this side of it, it was worth it because like whatever was not getting done task wise, you don't even remember what that was.
Right.
But you remember that, and she remembers, and, anyway, I just think that's like a great reminder in the midst of the busy is
transitions.
Is to maybe
don't be so overwhelmed with the transition.
Yeah. Like being sensitive to what God,
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, God, like who is there someone or something, or I don't know, that God help me to not miss you today. Like, what is the manna for today? And maybe it is going to go see someone who needs some encouragement or needs a friend or, know.
Yeah, I do think transitions can be overwhelming, changes in lives that we're going from one season of life or one chapter of our lives to another, or, we can find ourselves in a very unfamiliar place and be afraid of what's next. Are, caught off guard, angry, what life isn't the way that we thought. The kids aren't acting the way they should. They're not appreciative. They're not watching. We can so get caught up in what we would consider probably the negative of the change versus like, this is an opportunity for me to trust God in this and to see God in this. I remember, so many times, just thinking about the kids when you were little And I remember, busy because, you were younger than all the, you were our last, and 13 years difference and a 10-year difference. And I remember thinking, I just want to get you dressed. And then sometimes Howard, would get you dressed, and he would bring you to one of the other, of your siblings, either their basketball game or their cheerleading game. And I'd look at you, and you wouldn't match. I was like, Howard, oh, did you not comb her hair?
I what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And he would say, that's what she wanted to wear. I'm like, and I remember thinking all those times, like, I do not look like Mother of the Year right here.
Yeah.
It's like your hair wasn't combed and all that, and now as I remember having to walk myself off of the ledge of not caring about what everybody thought about me as a mother when you walked in, to now just so thankful that Howard was there at that time, the moment when all the other kids were in different seasons of life. And then here you came, and we were trying to manage how to do all different seasons and ages and stuff. And it was hard. It was hard to embrace every one of your different seasons of life and where you were. But I look back and I'm like, does that really matter now? Does any of those things that I thought were so important, does that really matter? And I feel like what we're trying to say is to embrace wherever you are right now and look at it, maybe if you can, with an eternal perspective. Well, 5 years from now, I care about this. Well, 10 years, will I care about this? And sometimes there are some things that maybe you will care.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things that you're going to have to kind of just find what is important and what isn't.
Yeah. And I think too, like trusting, again, like the daily bread, like he'll
give you what you need.
Yeah. He will provide for tomorrow, but he's providing today. And how can I see that? Thanks for listening. I'm so glad that you could be a part of our conversation. To continue the conversation, you can find Dot on social media at .bowen or visit her website, .bowen.com. Subscribe, like, and share with your friends, and we will see you next week on Write This Down with Bowen.